Welcome to Mind Shack. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today we are talking flat earth trolls. And this is a fascinating topic. I mean, it's all quite layered when it comes to conspiracy and flat earth, all the triggered goofs who just... It's a weird thing. Like, they don't mind people discussing Bigfoot or ghosts, but they'll spend countless hours on social media getting triggered by those who choose to discuss flat earth. It's very, very curious from a psychological standpoint. Very unique topic, I would say. I mean, you really don't get this level of triggering and just mental breakdowns from average goofs when it comes to other topics. I mean, they're simply not going out of their way to have these drawn out conversations or just troll posts, whatever you want to call it, just this back and forth. They're dedicating countless hours of their lives going back and forth with flat earthers. I mean, they're making entire accounts to do it. I mean, it's just, even on YouTube, I mean, there's entire YouTubers. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe they're not paid shills. Like, these full-time goofs, like Simon Dan, so-called Professor Dave, the McKeegan goof, like these full-time so-called flat earth debunkers, although they end up recruiting more flat earthers than even flat earthers just through their goofery and their inability to just grasp the basics of the scientific method. And also notice how they avoid even discussing logical fallacies or the difference between science and scientism like the plague, because they know it would expose them. So that's what we're discussing and more here on Mind Shock, logically and objectively, without hallucinating conclusions, without abandoning the scientific method or basic and logic and reason, which is actually going extinct, obviously. Mind Shock doing its part to prevent that from happening. If you want to help support the podcast, you can do it to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe. You could also become a member right here on the channel for exclusive streams and chats. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do it priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. If you're not at least a first grade English comprehension level, be prepared to be called out if you do choose to humiliate yourself in the comment section, as a lot of goofs choose to do. All right, so here's actually one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire flat earth movement, so to speak, and the flat earth presence on social media. I mean, this actually, I would say this is one of the main points that got me more curious. This got me more curious about the topic than the actual points of the topic itself. Just the level of triggering that occurs whenever flat earth is brought up. And I've talked about the reasons why, which my main thesis there is that even some of these Dunning-Kruger goofs, even with mental disabilities, they still have the mental wherewithal, or at least their subconscious does, to realize that the questions are valid. The blind faith in the Church of NASA and corrupt authorities, they know that that's not a valid foundation for beliefs. And even if they don't want to admit it, the scientism itself, I mean, everybody knows about the fraud of scientism. Whether they have the mental strength to admit it to themselves or not. I mean, some of these devout coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultist bootlickers, they probably don't have the mental strength or honesty to even admit that to themselves. But their subconscious knows, and you can't fool the subconscious mind. And that's why we get all these triggerings and various manifestations of responses, trolling, etc. It's the attempt to cope, the inability to cope from these coincidence theorist, anti-flat earther goofs. Now, again, this has nothing to do with the shape of the earth, whether it's flat, a globe. That's nothing to do with it. I believe in order to truly examine the psychological aspects of this, you have to set all that aside. And I know a lot of people on both sides, they don't even want to do that. And I mean, that's why Mind Shock exists, because we are objective, logical, and neutral. The shape of the earth doesn't change, like the exact true shape of the earth, if it even can be known. It doesn't actually, that's not relevant to the psychological response we're seeing. And it's a very curious psychological response. So it's kind of almost the same thing for those that follow Mindshock True Crime in the Maura Murray case. Just the level of triggering in the case from anyone even questioning whether or not Maura Murray even made it up to the location of where the Saturn was found. Just the level of triggering and mental disability coming out of the woodwork in regards to the complete abandonment of all logic and reason, it's kind of similar. Like, you don't see that in other true crime cases. Now, in the conspiracy world, I mean, even David Icke talking about presidents and so-called elite politician, whatever, them being shape-shifting reptilian aliens from another dimension, that doesn't bring out the level of censorship and triggered goofery that Flat Earth does. I mean, you don't see people just turning into mentally brain-dead buffoons, having complete breakdowns at the suggestion that the president could be an interdimension shape-shifting reptilian alien. But for Flat Earth, you do see this level of mental breakdown. You see entire channel. I mean, there aren't entire YouTube channels and social media accounts created dedicated to so-called debunking the David Icke reptilian alien shape-shifting interdimensional takeover theory. What does that tell you? This is one of the things that makes the flat earth topic so fascinating. Now, you could argue there is a little bit of a middle ground, the moon landing. You do see more people getting triggered at critical thinkers demanding extraordinary evidence for an extraordinary claim, like the moon landing, instead of, these petrified wood, rocks being passed off as moon rocks simply being petrified wood from Arizona, thousands of reels of telemetry data gone missing, like my dog gave my homework excuses, not being able to replicate anything. The most unscientific arguments are being used to support the moon, that man landed on the moon, or NASA did. And so it's almost like a subculture of goofs that worship at the altar of NASA and scientism that can't handle that being questioned. But it's still nowhere near the level of triggering as Flat Earth. I mean, that in and of itself is another layer of fascination we can add here. Flat Earth brings out the bootlicking, authority-worshipping cultist goofs like nothing else. And it's just so fascinating how no other topic brings this level of Dunning-Kruger stylings to social media. And again, we've examined the reasons why, but at the beginning, when I mentioned, I do find that fascinating, because it almost seems like there's a concerted anti-flat Earth effort. And of course, we have the Streisand effect with things being censored. It brings about even more interest, kind of how Alex Jones became even more popular and rich after his deplatforming. Now he supposedly owes however many trillions of dollars. Now he's back on Twitter as well. I mean, this whole spiral, it's actually very interesting, because the authority-worshipping cultists, they never learn. That's a fascinating thing about these coincidence theorist goofs. No matter how many conspiracy theories are not only admitted with empirically verifiable mountains of evidence presented, I mean, whether you want to talk MK Ultra, Gulf of Tonkin, whatever, all these conspiracies, Tuskegee, the poisoning of St. Louis, no matter how many of them come true, some of these brain-dead coincidence theorist goofs, they will never, ever learn their lesson. It's like they've renounced the use of logic and reason. Nothing will ever bring them back. They will worship at these government altars for the rest of their days. Now, I don't want to be too cynical. I don't want to be too much of a nihilistic pessimist, because I think if there's enough of a shock, like, it's kind of like the whole back the blue until it happens to you situation, where a lot of supporters of terrorists in costumes, aka police officers. Now, that's obviously a topic for a whole nother podcast, and not to say that there aren't good police officers out there, but there's goofs hallucinating that it's only a few bad apples. It's a couple isolated incidents. I mean, just the amount that's been caught on video of these terrorists, beating up people in wheelchairs, tasing people in wheelchairs, beating up old ladies, shooting unarmed children in the back while they're running away. I mean, the whole back to blue until it happens to you situation. I mean, what do cops have to do for some of these bootlickers to open their eyes? Do they have to kill their own dog? Do they have to kill one of their own family members? Do they have to arrest and imprison them unlawfully for X period of time and abuse them, bash their brains in while they're in a jail cell, which of course there's countless videos of that. So what do they have to do for some of these bootlickers? So I don't want to say there's zero hope. I mean, for the whole NASA situation, let's say at a point in the future, if NASA does become shut down due to all of the money laundering corruption nonsense that they're involved in, if they do get shut down and all of their records get seized, so let's look at the fall of the Soviet Union. Like a lot of those conspiracies, that all became public once those documents leaked. And so is it a similar situation where if NASA's ever disbanded or completely revamped and taken over by people with integrity who weren't aware of NASA's previous what they're doing or whatever, and all the records become public and then it becomes all known that everything was faked? I wonder the attitude some of these scientism, NASA worshipping cultist goofs, I wonder if that's really the only way that they would open their eyes. Because, I mean, there's actually goofs out there. They won't flat out deny MK Ultra, but they simply don't want to talk about it. So some of these just authority worshipping cultist statist goofs, they simply just don't want to. Kind of like how all of these scientism cultists, they don't want to even address the word scientism. They never want to honestly examine, like, what's the difference between actual, real scientific methodology, science itself, and scientism, the worship of fallible, corrupt authorities, and the shutting down of the utilization of the scientific method and basic logic and reason, and the awareness of the corruption and fallibility of humans involved in these things. So they just refuse to look at all that. So obviously, mental weakness is quite a spectrum. There's a huge spectrum when it comes to mental weakness, mental disability, and various levels of triggering with all of this. But again, circling back to the very beginning, flat Earth is just such a unique topic. Because look at and this goes for many different topics. I mean, there's goofs that are just full-time dedicated to getting triggered and humiliating themselves on various social media platforms. And there's no shortage of this. YouTube comments, Twitter, whatever. There are full-time goofs spending all of their free time, or who knows if they all their time at all. Like, I actually, in research for my upcoming book on the Dunning-Kruger effect and the decline of society, I do engage with these people. Sometimes I actually, I want to see how far they're going to go in their spiral of humiliating themselves. It's like they have some kind of fetish for humiliating themselves to the greatest degree possible, proving with each subsequent response that they cannot comprehend even first grade English, let alone anything else. And just getting more and more triggered and having these mental breakdowns. Obviously, at a certain point, I do have to block or cut people off because I don't want to be responsible for them harming themselves or anything like that. I mostly engage with trolls who are obviously, they don't have, or at least it's not apparent, any kind of actual condition where they're going to harm themselves. They're just these triggered goofs who are just borderline mentally disabled, and they just make a mockery of themselves. And I like to see how far they're willing to go. Obviously, if there's any signs of actual complete mental disability, and obviously, again, I don't want to be responsible for anybody being committed to mental institutions or self-harm in any way. So there's an ethical element here where there's only so far I'm willing to go with that, obviously. But some of these bigger so-called personalities are just these random high school kids, or hopefully they're not adults because that would be sad, but many adults as well, just spending all these countless hours engaging in a topic or other topics that they consider is so ridiculous and no time should be wasted on it. And yet they spend countless hours arguing with flat earthers who they deem to be just so dumb and incapable of comprehending anything, while they continue to engage with them for countless hours. I mean, this is a fascinating topic. I mean, this doesn't get talked about nearly as much. I mean, the toxicity of social media and just the endless trolls and goofs out there, I mean, that gets talked about to a certain extent, but specifically within Flat Earth or certain other conspiracies, I mean, just the level of hours and dedication some of these goofs are willing to spend in trying to so-called own or do a gotcha moment on a flat earther. I mean, none of these are in good faith or honest in any way, but just the level of hours they're willing to dedicate. I mean, this is some kind of a phenomenon. I might have to dedicate an entire chapter of the book on this, or even more. And my first book, basic, just on basic logic and logical fallacies, that's basically done. That will be coming out shortly. I won't have time to get it done before the holiday, so that will be after. I do have a bunch of upcoming Flat Earth debates. Some of them were highly requested. They are time consuming. I do attempt to count each and every logical fallacy, just to expose the lack of logical debate on the subject. So I do have a couple of those coming up. Pretty behind on them. I'm just getting constant requests, new requests almost every day. I will try to do absolutely every single one, but obviously it will take some time. So that's it for now. All the Mind Shock listeners, flat earthers and non-flat earthers alike. Actually, there's one more point I wanted to add. It's almost the flat earth thing. The only thing that I can think of that can rival that is Trump derangement syndrome. So the TDS goofs, it's actually kind of funny because some of these goofs, they spend more time just spewing pure hate at an individual they clearly don't know or understand, regardless of what you believe Trump's true motives are. That's not even the point. The TDS crowd, the Trump haters, they spend more time with Trump on their mind and more time posting about Trump than all of the Trump supporters. I mean, that's what's kind of hilarious. And these clueless goofs, I mean, again, that most of them are borderline mentally disabled as well, including many Hollywood celebrities. Unless you want to go with the theory that they're being paid to do that. But even so, the manner in which they do it is just so humiliating. I mean, they're not even on a first grade children's level. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, if you want to hate Trump, I mean, there's plenty of legitimate and intelligent ways to do that. And I don't include in the TDS crowd the people that have legitimate criticism that they back with evidence, because there's plenty of that. So, but it seems like 99.9% of all the Trump hate you see online in the TDS goofery, it's obviously not based in any kind of logic and reason or facts of any kind. In fact, most of them actually use their so-called arguments are demonstrably false. So it's curious. It's almost like that's on purpose as well. So that's the only thing I can kind of think of that rivals the flat earth goofery. So that's it for now. Looking forward to some of the feedback on this one. As always, you can support the podcast, donate to our PayPal, become a member, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you're still not getting the notifications, hit the like button and engage in the comments more, because that's how the YouTube algorithm works. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.